He mocked her outfit, her voice, even her lunch. But when he saw her name on the news, his knees gave out. The day she walked into the office, nobody really noticed. Her clothes were modest, her shoes worn at the edges, and her ID badge was clipped awkwardly to the collar of her gray blouse. She looked ordinary. The kind of person you'd forget 5 minutes after passing them in the hallway. And that was exactly how she wanted it. "Who hired her?" whispered Lena from HR, leaning over to the head of sales. "No idea," he shrugged. "Probably some cost-cutting initiative." She was assigned to Floor 17, the Client Acquisition Division, a place ruled with an iron smile by Richard Vale, Director of Strategy, a man who prided himself on dominance, subtle humiliation, and always being the smartest one in the room. The new girl's desk sat quietly near the glass wall. She kept her head down, took notes with pen and paper, and ate alone every lunch. The others laughed at her flip phone. Richard laughed harder. On her second day, he passed her in the hallway and said loud enough for the interns to hear, "You know, we have wardrobe stipends. You don't have to dress like a librarian from the 80s. She blinked slowly. "Thank you, sir," he smirked. Another one broken in. But what no one knew was that every day at 6:30 a.m., before the building came alive, she walked the halls. Not to explore, to listen, to document, to watch. Her steps echoed through the stillness, unnoticed. And on her desk, beneath her bland notepads and outdated planner, sat a notebook filled with diagrams of the company's operations. Connections, weak spots, names, patterns. She wasn't nobody. She was preparing. By the third week, she had been dismissed, ignored, insulted, and routinely given the most menial tasks by Richard. He once assigned her to bring him coffee from a specific shop, 20 minutes across town, during a thunderstorm. She came back soaked, handed him the coffee, and apologized for being late. He sipped. "Cold. Try again next time." The room snickered. Behind her back, people started calling her Mouse. Because she was quiet. Because she didn't fight back. Because she always looked like she was listening, but never speaking. One afternoon, Richard held a presentation for a $1 million pitch. The clients arrived early, the file with his slides, gone, replaced by a blank white screen. He turned red. Who the hell deleted? But before he could finish, she slipped in from the hallway and softly said, "Your backup drive is still connected in the meeting room on 12. I believe your original file is there." He blinked. She continued, "Would you like me to retrieve it, sir?" He waved her off, humiliated. When he recovered, he snapped at her in private. "If you're so damn observant, why don't you actually do something useful?" She nodded, but he didn't realize. She already had. Every misplaced document, every strange calendar glitch, every minor chaos, she'd been behind it all. Not out of spite, out of strategy. And every detail she gathered, every whisper in the hallway, every misstep Richard made was logged. Because this wasn't about coffee. This was about the crown. Monday morning arrived with sirens. Not literal ones, not yet. But metaphorical alarms began blaring across the 17th floor as emails were sent from corporate. Subject, urgent board update, mandatory attendance. No one knew why. Richard strutted into the glass-walled conference room, still smirking from last week's internal praise. He had just landed a minor licensing deal. Nothing big, but enough for upper management to notice. He looked around. Everyone was there, even the interns. And the new girl sat near the back, silently scribbling something in her notebook. He rolled his eyes. Then the projector blinked on. A video began to play. A female voice narrated, calm and clear. "This is a timeline of ethical violations, misappropriations, and documented psychological harassment committed over the past 9 months under Director Vale's leadership." Laughter died in people's throats. Screens froze, mouths opened. On screen, a detailed flowchart appeared, connecting names, incidents, outcomes, with exact timestamps, emails, witness reports, memos, all linked to Richard. Richard stood, trembling. This is fake. I demand to know." The screen changed again. A scanned signature appeared, his, and below it, the name of the person who had filed the internal investigation. Her name, clear as day, Isabella Wren, Executive Oversight Consultant, acting undercover on behalf of the board. The room went silent. Richard fell back into his chair. She looked up from her notes. "Good morning," she said. "Shall we begin?" The silence was suffocating. Richard Vale stood frozen at the center of the glass-walled conference room, his usually sharp posture now crooked under the weight of confusion and panic. On the screen behind him, his name blazed in bold red letters, tied to an intricate spiderweb of violations and misconduct. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Isabella Wren stood at the edge of the room, still, composed, deliberate. She wasn't gloating. There was no satisfaction in her eyes, only duty. I want a lawyer," Richard finally sputtered, tugging at his collar. "You'll get one," Isabella replied coolly. "They're waiting for you downstairs, along with HR and the internal audit team." The board members, normally so reserved, exchanged glances. Some of them nodded, silently affirming what they had already voted on the night before. Richard laughed, a brittle, desperate sound. "This is a joke, a prank, some kind of performative charade." Isabella didn't blink. She reached into a slim folder and produced a printed email, his email, authorizing the cover-up of a data breach that had exposed thousands of clients' private information. "You signed this," she said, her voice level, 3 months ago, then deleted the server logs 2 hours later. One of the board members spoke. "We've been investigating you for nearly a year, Richard." Isabella's findings were just the final confirmation. Security entered the room with quiet efficiency, not aggressive, but firm. Richard's smirk shattered into disbelief. "You're dragging me out? In front of them? After everything I've done for this company?" Another board member, a man named Collins, replied coldly, "No, we're escorting you out because of everything you've done to this company." As Richard was led away, his voice turned venomous. "You'll regret this. You all will. She's manipulating you." The doors shut behind him. No one moved, no one cheered, no one clapped. It was over, but only for him. The fallout was immediate and loud. By the time Isabella returned to her desk that afternoon, the company's name was already trending on social media, not because of a scandal, because of a reckoning. Who is Isabella surged to the top of corporate Twitter. LinkedIn was awash with speculation. Former employees came forward, one by one, sharing stories they had buried under shame and NDAs. A former intern posted a photo of her shaking hands with Isabella in the elevator. "Didn't know who she was. She complimented my shoes. Found out later she saved my career." Within hours, a well-known business podcast interrupted its weekly segment to run a special report. "We've just received confirmation that the woman behind the internal takedown of Richard Vale is not just a whistleblower. She was planted by the board." The next day, CNN Business ran a segment titled "The Quiet Assassin of Corporate America." People were hungry for her story, but she never gave it to them. While the world speculated, Isabella was in her new corner office, sleeves rolled up, going through stacks of neglected HR reports, overlooked product proposals, and silenced ethics complaints. She made no statements, no interviews, no tweets. But every department head received a private meeting request. Some entered nervous, others smug. All exited changed. One senior director, notorious for microaggressions and gaslighting, was reassigned to data archival in a basement room with no windows. A kind-hearted analyst who'd been stuck in the same role for 4 years without a raise was promoted with back pay. And every week, a new plaque appeared in the lobby. Zero tolerance, zero excuses. 3 months later, the company was unrecognizable. The sterile, quiet culture of silence had become one of cautious openness. Employees weren't afraid to speak. They were invited to. Weekly town halls were introduced, not PR shows, but real conversations. Questions were anonymous, answers were transparent. Isabella started each one the same way. "This isn't about me. It's about who we become when no one is watching." She didn't build a cult of personality. She built a system, one that outlived her presence. One that punished not just illegality, but indifference. That rewarded not just success, but integrity. And still, she walked the halls each Friday, not as a shadow, but as a leader. Employees began to look forward to her questions. What's something we're not doing that we should be? Who's someone on your team that deserves more recognition? Where's the bottleneck? And then there were the notes. Handwritten, thoughtful, left on desks, chairs, inside reports. "Your risk analysis saved us a disaster. I saw it. IW. Your team's kindness during onboarding was mentioned by 3 new hires. You're doing more than you know. You made the new intern feel seen. That matters." By the end of the fiscal year, the company's retention rate had increased by 34%. Customer satisfaction rose, internal referrals skyrocketed, and competitors began reaching out to study their internal process. But Isabella had one more move to make. She returned to the board, this time with her own presentation. She proposed a new initiative, the Wren Protocol, a rotating internal audit program that embedded anonymous ethics officers across departments on a 6-month cycle. Not spies, listeners, just like she had been. The board approved it unanimously, and in her final meeting as executive ethics officer, Isabella Wren stood before the team and said, "We often think leadership is about power, presence, or persuasion, but real leadership is about quiet courage. It's about protecting people who will never know your name and doing the right thing when no one thanks you for it." Then she closed her notebook and walked away.